How do you want to start this off?
How
do we kick this off now? I had two ideas.
Okay, what you got?
The first is I thought we could slide in with a Hall & Oates duet of
I like it.
How Does It Feel to Be Back?
Okay. All right.
I think that's the winner right there, right?
Is that, I don't know. How does it feel to be back? I don't know that one. Should I know that one?
I mean,
get the fuck out. You're going deep in the Hall & Oates canon.
There's no such thing as deep in the Hall & Oates canon. It's just all
it's all right on the surface.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's all the top.
I will tell you, if I search for Hall & Oates right now, not a chance. I'm looking at, I'll say roughly 35 songs, 40 songs. Not one of them is that song. They have something.
It's a
shame. Nope, you're done. But I'd be happy to learn that real quick.
Okay. Good. Sarah, take a minute. You gotta decide which part you want, though.
I'm generally the big spoon. I'm right. What? Oh, I would go, high harmonies. High harmonies, sir.
All right, so your oats.
Yes. I will grow my hair so that I have that look.
Yeah. I'm going to need a good, mane if I'm going to be Hall. All right, so...
That was one idea.
Do you have any ideas? What are you bringing to the table?
Well, I brought my wit and my charm along the way. I just think, you could just roll back and be like, and we're back. Cue the music. Hit it. That's all you got. No, I think it's good. I think just, saying, hey, we're back. Teaser, got some good things going on. Already have some big names and hopefully some bigger names coming down the road.
Perfect. We'll do that. At least I'm going to tell you where to do that. I'm really just going to chop this whole thing up and use
I know. Yes.
various words that make you sound...
We're back. On a loop.
Right.
But then pitched down to make it sound even worse.
Yes, for sure. All right, let's get to it. Welcome back to Native Tongues, your favorite podcast of all time, where we speak to writers and musicians about where they call home and how that place influenced their voice. If you want to be a friend, leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Check us out on Spotify. Look us up on Instagram @NativeTonguesPod. We appreciate every little boost we can get, and it helps us to continue the show. This week, on our first episode back, we've got a neighbor from up north. This is an author from Canada that I really like. He started with a book of short stories and has since published a memoir and novels under his name, Craig Davidson. However, he's best known for his best-selling horror novels like The Troop, written under his pen name. His newest work, The Queen, which just dropped, is about a high school girl who receives a series of instructional text messages from a friend that disappeared months before. Over the course of 24 hours, she needs to find out who the messages are from and what happened to her friend. It's a fun mystery that takes a turn into some horrific body horror. And though his books are not for the squeamish, he's an incredibly mild-mannered and nice person. So, let's welcome to the pod, author Nick Cutter. We were just catching up.
Yeah. Trying to deal with the fallout of national nightmare.
Yeah. That's like we watched years ago in 2016 up here in Canada and just thought couldn't possibly be possible. You went to bed thinking, no, Hillary's going to somehow figure this out. And then it didn't feel that way last night though. I felt like going to bed and it's going to happen all over. It's like the first time it's terrible and the second time it's still terrible, but you're also inured to it at some level, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny you say that because my thing was just I feel like we know so much more, and there's been such a ramp up of just ridiculousness even in the last 3 weeks of just insanity. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And still people are like, it's fine.
Yeah. Doubling down on everything. Just
Yeah, you just learn. We have up here, the same thing. We have a prime minister who's been around past his term limit probably, and sort of the hope that he came in with is kind of faded, and he's a liberal, so we'd rather see, but there's just this stuff percolating in North America, though, that type of leadership, that type of message, it feels like it's reaching people a lot easier than it used to.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out last night with my friend. How did we keep Obama for 8 years? Like, what did he do? And I think it's just that he was eloquent. He didn't have any scandals, and he had someone to go up against that was, I don't know, I guess easier to defeat. But there was also like a framework with which you were expected to stay in as a politician or a president,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the thing with Trump is that he's tapped into such a core part of that, like people, didn't want to say was there, but it really
Yeah,
is.
it is. Globally, it's there, but it's definitely reached America. So
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. It's a sad day to do a podcast. It's a sad day to do almost anything, but
it is.
This is a good distraction, if anything.
Right. Yeah. It'll work as that, I suppose.
It's a good call. So that actually leads to my first question, which is, do you have a guest room? Like if we just needed a little bit of time if we move up there, can we sort of lay low for a little
Flee
bit?
to Canada for a little
Yeah, like a granny suite or something. I fielded a lot of such questions from my American friends back in 2016. And
okay.
Obviously I said there's lots of room up here in Canada, but most of you decided to, just bite down in your mouthpiece and go for the next 4 years.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes.
It's like
now.
self-flagellation.
Yeah.
We just love to torture ourselves.
Being that there were 51% or however many votes, I don't know when I'm doing a podcast with Americans now if I'm going to, I'm going to turn on, they're going to have a MAGA hat on or something. And I'm going to,
right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What am I going to do about that?
It's really funny because, like, obviously I know Aaron's politics, he knows mine, but I'm like, I don't know, you're a writer. I just assume, like you're going to be kind of in a zone. I've read your writing and sort of where you are. I'm sure it's going to happen at some point. We're going to come across somebody that's super MAGA and they're going to pop in and be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got to change some notes here. I got to go to a different notebook. Hold on.
Bad reception. I think we got to cancel it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I had a question once. I was in Ireland of all places. And this woman she's like, well, you must be as a Canadian, you must be very proud to come from the same country as Jordan Peterson. And just that sort of like absurd sort of assumption that I would be, or my fellow panelists who are also Canadian, one of them Indigenous, and you almost feel bad letting them down in such a public way of being like, no, it's zero pride about that at all. And
it's very low on the list of exports we're proud of.
Right. Yeah, exactly. In fact, it's quite a bit of shame, but whatever. It takes all comers. Anyway.
Well, that's what, we're going to Europe in June of next year. So
are you coming back?
I don't know. I will see. I don't know. It's going to be a scouting trip. We're going to figure it out. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, you might not be allowed to come back. You might be classed as an immigrant at that point.
We might be actually getting deported. We're going to get deported to Italy. My family's from England originally, so they're like, you go back.
You take that risk.
You don't. You elected to get out of there.
Right. So. We're at capacity. Get out of here. So where in Canada are you?
Toronto. Yeah.
Okay.
So not too far from, 2 hours from the Buffalo border or the New York border. Mm-hmm. So used to live in St. Catharines, which is right next to the border, right next to Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
And we used to go over all the time and still do. I mean, I went to school in Iowa for a couple years. So, I mean, I love the States, still do. But there's no but. It is what it is. The political climate is what it is. But it's not, again, to say that we're removed from it up here in Canada would be a lie because that type of temperament is absolutely alive and thriving up here now too.
How did you choose Iowa?
I got into the writers program down there. There's, I know of all the places, right? Why Iowa? Although I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time a great deal, but I ended up having two programs I could have chose from. One was Austin, U of T Austin, and the other one was University of Iowa. And the program sort of was a bit more lauded at Iowa. Had I to live my life over again, I think I probably would have chose Austin just because Austin seems like more fun of a place to live in for 2 years or a year and a half.
It's a very cool city.
Yeah,
it probably would have been a lot cooler then too.
Yeah. Yeah. So in any case, but I do love the vibe of, I really enjoyed, again, it's not that dissimilar from Canada, I mean, It is in some fundamental ways different. Like I said, I really enjoyed my time in America.
We talked to somebody else who did the Iowa.
Brian Quijada.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Okay.
For like playwriting.
Yeah, it's a very popular,
for playwriting.
Kind of incepted the whole MFA program craze.
Were you writing prolifically before then? Or was it just sort of like a goal?
Prolifically, I'd written a book. And then I went there because I'd already done another degree here. They were able to like knock off some time. I think I ended up doing like 3 semesters rather than 4. It's like a 2-year program normally. But I could have stayed longer. I said I really did actually enjoy my whole time there. But I was on a visa, so they weren't going to let me just sort of malinger around Iowa.
Drift and hang
sort
around.
Like, you got your education, skedaddle back to Canada.
Yeah, hit the bricks.
Because that's what we don't need in America is more educated people. Get your education and get the hell out. When was that? When were you there? So you said you had already written a book. Which book?
Yeah, so it would have been 2006, I guess. Yeah, a good time to be there. And then I came back up here to Canada and lived in Calgary, and then moved to Toronto. Then moved out east where I met my wife, my now wife, and we moved back here to Toronto about 12 years ago, and we've been here since and had kids and are now ensconced.
Yes. And just writing all the time, like
pretty much. So much. Yeah. I mean, I'm fortunate to be able to do so. Yeah, that sort of has become my career, such as it is for now. I mean, long may it persist, or you really don't know. I mean, the writing, as you guys know, probably talking to a lot of people, it's you're fortunate to have the career for as long as you have it, and if the wheels blow off at some point, then I'll find something else to do, I guess.
Right. It seems like you have, a lot of tendrils out, though. Like you're hooks in a number of areas. You're not just writing a novel every few years.
No, yeah. Yeah, it's certainly like under my own name and under Nick Cutter. And, every so often the siren song of Hollywood comes along and someone suggests that I should write a script based on a piece of work, and I get all excited, and then I do it, and then they say it sucks, and then I I realize that that's probably not maybe in my wheelhouse, but I'm sure I will be beguiled by that siren song again sometime in the future, and I'll probably once again fail. But I'm up here in Toronto. I mean, I just take the money and my bruised ego fixes itself after a while, and I go back about my life.
Have you optioned or sold any scripts?
Scripts, yeah. My friend and I we wrote a script based on a novel of mine called The Breach, and it was made into a low-budget Canadian movie up here during the pandemic. They did a great job on it. I think, if anything, me and my writing partner realized we'd probably written a $5 million picture or maybe a $10 million picture, and they just, you had $1.2 million to try to effectively, sort of show what was on the page, and it sort of bore the strain of that a little bit. Yeah, and beyond that, my friend Andrew Piper and I, who's also another writer, we've, written stuff together, some of which has been optioned, none of which has been produced. I think a lot of writers, you can be seduced by that. And there are some writers like the Nick Pelizzato's of this world or Richard Price's who like do it so seamlessly that makes the rest of us think, oh, well, why they're not exceptional, are they? They're not like in any way special. And you're like, oh, no, they are. They certainly are good. They've managed to sort of clear that gap, which a lot of us tumble down into, or at least I have. So with any option nowadays, I say, if I can be involved in the writer's room at some point, and it's written into the language. I think the term they use a lot is in good faith. It's like, well, you're dealing with devils and rascals, and there's no good faith that I can see in evidence. But so that seems like a worthless, sort of bit of verbiage. But in any case, maybe one of these days they'll let me there, and I'll say, I'll just be quiet. I'll just sit over in the side, and you'll give me a bindle full of money at the end, and I'll come back up to Canada, and that'll be fine.
I mean, it sounds like a win.
Yeah, it would be for me. I think they think I'm going to be interfering or something, or sit like holding my head in my hands. That, what are you doing with my baby? But I don't care. Eviscerate it.
Right. Just want to see it come to life.
Yourselves with it, avenge yourselves on it.
Is The Breach? Is that the name of the movie?
That's the name of the movie. Yeah. My friend Ian Weir and I wrote it. Ian Weir is like an old hand up here in Canada. He actually has a TV show now, Murder in a Small Town, on Fox, which has been a long gestating project, and I'm so happy for him to have finally gotten it off the ground. But he wrote, you guys wouldn't know this show, being Americans, I guess, but we have the CBC down here, up here, and it's our version of, I guess, NPR TV. And he wrote for this show called The Beachcombers, which is like something that I grew up on when I was a kid. So wow. To know my friend and writing partner wrote for The Beachcombers was wonderful. So anyways, yeah, that's the movie, and produced by some friends of mine here in Toronto who sort of are really involved in low budget Canadian horror. So it was a great experience, and you learn things.
See what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, that's right.
As it's playing out.
Same with books. There is a learning curve, obviously. I mean, I'm sure with any creative endeavor, none of us are generally masters to start. So anyways, yeah. And anyways, it was a good director, and I think it was a fun production. I think everyone involved enjoyed it.
Cool. I have it on my watch list. I need to get around to watching it. So where did you start?
Writing, you mean?
Yeah.
Probably in my early 20s. Took forever. I think there's that Malcolm Gladwellian statement of like taking 10,000 hours to, I think he says, to become a master at something. I wouldn't consider myself a master now. And I've spent well over 10,000 hours at this, but, was sending back in the day, printing out my stories on the computer and putting them in envelopes and sending them out to wherever I could, and getting old fashioned rejection slips in the mail, and probably got several hundred of those. Before something did click, and I got like 4 or 5 acceptances seemingly in a row. And then that was enough to get me a book deal as a short story writer. And that's probably when I was 28, 29. And there was a novel after that. And then the novel really spectacularly cratered and did really poorly. And it was, no, you can't point the finger of blame at anyone but myself. And then for a while, I drove a school bus.
It's all the marketing team's fault.
Yeah, well, that's why I tried to, I tried to blame them. I mean, in my head, I tried to blame them, but in the end, I came around. They didn't write the book. So sort of peripatetic life of a journalist and bus driver, librarian. Yeah, then I sort of had the career got resurgent at around 2014, and since then I've been sort of a full-time writer, either writing under my own name or under, for the last decade I guess now, Nick Cutter.
Did you start out, were you creative in high school, that kind of thing? Like, was it always itching at you or something? Because to say you just started picking up writing at in your 20s feels a little.
Well, you're right. Yeah, no, I was a very poor student. I didn't really care about much in high school. But the one thing I did, I did a lot of reading. I enjoyed reading. I'd always really sort of had an affinity for the written word and movies and horror, I think maybe specifically.
What were some of your favorites?
King. I mean, I think anyone who reads my books knows King has got to be like the main guy, but Lovecraft, Clive Barker, Robert R. McCammon, Anne Rice. I mean, all over the gamut, probably. I mean, I've said before, like back when I was in the 80s reading, we would go into the drugstore and they would have this, spinning racks of paper.
Sure.
And I would, be allowed to pick a book or two at my own leisure. And my parents were fine. Like, they just supported my reading. They didn't really care what it was. And so, I read tons of books from writers who I probably couldn't even, like Rick Atala and others who were like really popular, sort of paperback writers.
Gotcha. Were you just going on book covers still?
Yeah,
I feel like if I'm that age, I'm just spinning the rack and I'm like, this one looks insane.
Holographic puns or skeleton cheerleaders, or those were definitely caught my eye and my fancy. So like Graham Masterson, sort of late period Richard Matheson. So lots of those guys, men and women. There was a horror paperback line called Leisure in the 90s, which did a lot of like Ed Lee and Tom Piccirilli, and I would read a ton of those as well. So it was kind of like all over the place, my reading, I think was. My early affinity and hope was to be kind of be a horror writer. And I think my early attempts down that line, we actually, in Ontario here, we had grade 13 back in the day when I was younger. We're dead now. We've eliminated that, but grade 13, I don't know, I guess because you guys are all dunderheads. You need an extra year before you go.
We should do one more.
Right, just one more.
Yeah. Okay.
Collectively, you all are dumb. You need an extra year, we decided.
But just you guys, we'll eliminate this.
The species will get smarter here in Canada, and we won't need it anymore. But for your generation,
for now,
you're all very thick. You need an extra year. So during that year, one of our teachers did a creative writing course, which I think was the first in that city. And I took it immediately. And I was such an apathetic student, and it was known within those halls that I was an apathetic student. So when I think she came over to me and was sort of like almost bemusedly said, Craig, you actually seem to have some talent here. I'm saying I'm sort of surprised to be saying so, but I can't help but say it. Some of these stories seem to show some promise. And she helped me. She actually bought an old version of the Writer's Market, which used to be this giant, thick, paperback that
addresses to submit stuff to.
Got a copy from some year.
Yeah, exactly. It sort of became an online thing later, but back then it was in paper. And so I was very grateful, I think, to have that encouragement. I mean, when I was as I said, in my early and mid-20s, when I was living in a shoebox apartment in someone's basement and eating boiled potatoes and trying to be a writer, I probably wish she had just said, "You suck." We knew you suck and you do suck, and so just go do something else with your life.
Why didn't you stifle my creativity?
Yeah, exactly.
Just squash my dreams right then, and I could have moved on to be a painter or something. Could have done something worthwhile and fix lights.
And but she didn't, bless her. And I've had a chance to thank her in the ensuing years for having done so, Miss Jeffries.
That's awesome.
So I guess that's sort of a muddled and convoluted path as to my starting of it, of just loving reading and sort of getting into it fledglingly in high school and university, writing stories. But then I really started committing myself to sending them out and trying to get published probably in my early mid 20s. And that's where I guess it all sort of took root.
With short stories?
With short stories. Yeah. I always kind of recommend writers who are starting out. I mean, some are right out of the gate as a novel writer, and their novel is awesome. But most of us, I feel like, start with something smaller and more manageable. And that was me. And then it got to a point where it seemed like the ideas couldn't be contained in a reasonable size of a story that would get accepted in a magazine or a newspaper. I mean, not a newspaper, but in a journal, which is 5,000 to 8,000 words. Once you get beyond that, unless you're like Alice Munro or something, you're not going to sell something of that length. So then it was almost determined that I was going to write novels. And I haven't written a short story in a long time now, because for whatever reason, I just think that I don't get short story sized ideas anymore.
Sure.
The same thing of writing a $5 million movie or a $10 million movie, but
right.
Sorry, I can only think.
Yeah, exactly. It's got to have explosions, and
it's funny you say that though. So because I read The Deep, and I was thinking that there were the moments in that where there's lots, sort of flashbacks and things like that to that I'm some of these almost feel that they could have been isolated little short stories and things that kind of get put into.
Yeah, you're very right about that. That was the one novel. Someone asked me about that the other day, and it was, we had just had our first child, and he would not sleep. And thus we did not sleep for probably 6 months. And I was on deadline to finish this book. And it was the one book where the external events really sort of infected the writing. I was in this phantasmagorical dreamscape for half of the time, where I was sleep deprived and scared and kind of constantly on edge. Yeah. And you're right, that book, in some ways, looking back, not that I've reread it, but it's a bunch of scenes in search of a deeper, more coherent.
Right. I mean, it comes together. It's cohesive. It doesn't. I didn't feel like it. I didn't feel like it wasn't cohesive.
Oh no, well, I do. So it's okay. Ken, you don't have to say so. I can say so. I mean, it has its fans, and I think some people like it sort of muddled, claustrophobic. I think I nailed that part of it. The claustrophobia and stuff, I think, works quite well. Which probably again was coming from some.
Right, trapped in your house.
Right, trapped in your house. Can't run away from my family now. We've had a kid.
Right. Yeah, I love that stuff. That deep sea horror. There's not enough of it.
No, I know. I feel like it was big. They had Deep Star 6 and
Leviathan.
That's right,
Sphere,
exactly. Yeah. And they had one was underwater, I think.
Oh yeah.
In Stewart, right? So I mean, it comes around every so often. But you're right. I can't get enough of it. I think it's great.
How old are your kids, by the way?
12 and 4. So
it
would have been Nick, our first, our son, who was.
Oh my gosh! Do you write under the same name?
I do. We had been
trying to set him up for the future.
Well, I thought it'd be a nice little honorific for him, and maybe at the time he thought it was kind of cool. Now he's almost a teenager, so everything I do is inherently lame.
Right.
But hopefully he'll regrow back into it in his 20s. Think, oh yeah, it's kind of cool. Thanks, Dad, for naming your pen name after me.
Right. So cool. I've got a 9 and a 12-year-old.
Oh,
also.
Okay.
I've got 12 and 15. So.
Oh, okay, so we're all pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah,
sure. One outlier at 4. You guys did the regular sort of reasonably close in age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the 12-year-old, it's funny to like see what she reads, or even my 9-year-old, he just devours everything.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it's cool to watch. But the content that he's reading, it's always like, well, is this appropriate? But I was very much like you. Like, there was no boundaries. Just if it had a cool cover, like I would pick it up and read it.
Yeah,
No one said otherwise.
No, I would support my kids in that as well. My daughter seems to have maybe a deeper affinity for the creepier stuff. It's tough to tell, but even at her age, she'll.
My daughter wants nothing to do with it.
No, and that's it. My son probably is the same way, but it was hilarious. The other day, she was downstairs watching Snow White, like the old version of it, and she came up and she's like, "It's done," and we're like, "What? No, it's not." She's like, "Yeah, Snow White died." And we realized she had turned it off once.
Oh my gosh.
It died. It's like, well, that's.
You should let her hold on to that and be like, yeah, it's a real tragedy. A lot of people don't realize Disney was a little bit strange at first.
I just felt it was a peculiar part. Like, we didn't have a power outage or anything. Like, we chose to turn it off at the point where Snow White just like it suited her own like sense of an ending. Like, yeah. She's dead. I like it.
That works.
Finished. Yeah. So, whereas my son doesn't really, prefer stuff that's scary. Like, he went out as a puffer fish for Halloween. You know what I mean? He's always had sort of like, he's never gone for like the Scream guy or anything like that. So it's funny. It's funny where your kids, but I'm the exact same way. If he or she decides to pick up something that is creepy or, whatever you would think, well, okay, is this testing the thresholds of that age? I guess I'd give thought to it, but I think I'd ultimately I just like them to be reading. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'd rather make the mistake of them reading something, that might be a little over their heads than not
exactly.
reading at all.
Yeah, or like, YouTube shorts or all the other ways in which kids can obviously
100%
indulge their time.
Right. My daughter was very much in the space where it was like, if anything bad happens, like in the first few pages of the book, she's like, nope, I'm out. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm like, well, it'll probably get better. She's like, no. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. A lot of adults do the same. I feel like you just, you sort of have your sense of what you're looking for in a book. And I feel that it's kind of fair, like truth in advertising. If you're going to bury those sort of things until midway, or in a way, it's a good strategy, because then you've sort of ideally got them hooked already, and you can start
to find out what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. But if you do it immediately, you risk a reader sort of saying, okay, this is just not my cup of tea. But at least I don't know. I feel like you're being honest with the reader too, and you're not leading them down the primrose path.
That was something I appreciated in The Queen.
Yeah, I was just about to say that is like to a T.
Yes.
The first, I guess the prologue, I guess it is.
Yeah.
But I'm like, what the hell is going on? I don't know what is happening, and it's all bad. Right. And it's just, I don't know.
There's a horrific cold open. But then as soon as you get to the story, a couple pages in, it's propulsive. And I love a story that has like a MacGuffin that will just move the character, in almost a timed sequence.
Yeah.
There's a mystery element, but it's going to end in
you have a date
absolute
with
chaos.
That in the future.
Yeah, exactly. I've never worked with that before. Like the ticking clock, the sort of 24 hours idea. Mm-hmm. And I thought, why not? And I definitely, as I've said before, I was really influenced by 13 Reasons Why, the technique of something that sort of some physical object in 13 Reasons Why. It's a Walkman. And in The Queen, it's a cell phone, because it just sort of is more appropriate to the time, and it offers you.
They keep saying Pikachu.
Yeah, exactly, and it allows you to sort of do the intertextual stuff. But I thought, what a cool, like when I read that book, and I know that book has certain some people are against it, and fair enough, it's not really here now to.
More for content than the writing mechanics.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a tricky book to write in that way, because I'd never done it before. Mm-hmm. And as with the deep, you kind of need to, for me anyways, you needed to find moments to go back and sort of unravel those characters' lives a little bit, because they never actually do meet in the book itself. Really, they never actually interact with one another. Other than through the WAV files. So anyways, it was a tricky thing to navigate, and kind of a fun book to write. Different than anything I've ever done before.
Yeah, I'm going to try not to spoil anything.
Sure.
But where did the insect ideas come from, or the body horror? There had to be a couple of specific things.
Hard to say, right? I think I've always had a fascination. It's weird with writing and with horror especially. I don't exactly know where the ideas necessarily come from. I mean, some of them can be pegged over to my influences, but others, the stuff like a fascination with bugs and insects, I think they go hand in hand with body horror. If you look at like Cronenberg's The Fly,
Oh yeah.
I think is obviously very fundamentally influential to me in the idea of like crossing phylums and species and how revolting that could be. And I was kind of influenced by you. We're talking about the election and Elon Musk having
That's where I was going to go with my
right,
next question.
like having something to meddle some way of he didn't interfere with it, I guess. But anyways, he clearly made his choice clear. But yeah, I thought about him and his space exploration stuff and how
billionaires are looking for ways to waste money.
Well, yeah, waste money and maybe meddle with the blockchains of human and insect sort of genetics. And I thought, well, what if they wanted to create a creature that could exist on a hostile planet? You know what I mean? Like in atmospheres that were more punishing or air that wasn't breathable to humans. And well, we need something that's sort of between those two phylums, and we could maybe have something that could be valuable for us. And that was the initial conception of where the villain of the book, where his kind of mad idea comes from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then, of course, the hubris of the character doesn't allow him to see the consequences.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's right. The classic sort of Frankensteinian, Promethean notion of without hubris, there'd hardly be horror. You know what I mean? You need that part, I think, of the human makeup to push somebody to that point where they're so arrogant or blinded that they don't see sort of the bad consequence of this or the sort of the yin and yang of it. But having written initial draft that way, I felt like it wasn't working enough. And so I just thought, what is the most ridiculous, absurd trauma that someone could face as a young person specifically that would repattern their entire existence?
Without spoiling it, you had me Googling stuff. Like, holy crap.
Oh, yeah, so did I.
Is that a thing? Do I need to know about this? Is this something?
Yeah. Well, and I was influenced there by, as I say in the acknowledgments, this novella or short story that was very popular back in the day, and I think you can still read it easily now, called Lenigan versus the Ants, which deals with this species of ants. And I remember reading it when I remember, as I said, I saw a MacGyver episode first when I was young, which was basically Lenigan versus the Ants. And when I read Lenigan versus the Ants years later, I'm like, oh, this reminds me of that MacGyver episode. Oh, this probably was influenced, that MacGyver episode. So that was certainly where sort of the infancy of the idea is, and plus just wanted to give that character some kind of ridiculous trauma that he could carry with him for the rest of his life.
Right. Yeah, that was fun. And like you mentioned before, I could see why this is closer to The Troop than some of your other books.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're both pretty approachable, though. They're not like weird, otherworldly H.P. Lovecraft kind of stuff. They're still pretty grounded in reality. They just get darker as it goes on. But,
it depends.
So what was the reception to The Troop when that came out? Because is that your best-selling one?
Oh, yeah, I would say for sure. And I don't really remember the initial feeling about it. It's hard to remember now. I know I liked it, and I wrote it really quickly, and it felt like it was the first opportunity for me to actually go and write a full-on horror book.
Yeah.
And even once I passed it by my agent, that was the first main hurdle, because I thought he was, we had not had that kind of a relationship where I had
say, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, exactly. I had to that point put across the bows, and we had started a relationship based on this type of book. And then I'm coming across with this other, I can't think of a relationship aspect, but you come home with like mascot costume and say, darling, I want to work this into our relationship. I hope you're okay with that. So it takes a certain amount of forbearance and forgiveness. But yeah, he was like, cool, we can, he had people he could send it to, and there was some interest. And so, yeah, I think it probably has been a longer gestating sort of a thing. It's had its fits and starts, but as I've been told, it ended up getting popular on TikTok, which is a platform that I don't engage with. I see you probably as well see your kids watching it, right?
That's where your kids are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right?
My kids aren't not on it.
Oh, good. Yeah, exactly. Good.
My kids actually are too, but my son just got Instagram, and so he's consumed with that. Right
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Well, mine, my son too. So in any case, I think it's probably had a second life there. And yeah, it's been fun, and I think it's been generally well liked, or as revolted people, or there are certain books in the horror sphere that almost exist as a dare to readers. Do you know what I mean? Like can't it's like a spicy chicken wing or those spicy chip challenges. Can you eat?
It's out there to push you to the edge and be like, okay,
Yeah,
stop,
right.
just stop.
Which was not the point at which I wrote it as a sort of a dare or a threat or anything. But in any case, it's had its own life, and I've been really pleased with that. But obviously, every book is its own sort of thing, and you never know where anything's going to go. Yeah, I don't know. That's probably a very wishy-washy answer, but it's been lovely.
It's your first one written as Nick Cutter too, and to have some success with that has got to feel pretty good, at least to get you sort of going in that way.
Yeah, it does. It's hilarious,
You just wanted to separate it enough from the rest of your writing?
I guess.
Was that the idea?
Well, to a degree, that was sort of a publisher idea. The Craig Davidson stuff was very different. And I think there was a notion within publishers that like, well, listen, let's separate those camps a little bit. And if you don't mind, and I'm like, I don't mind, but also I'm not going to make any real secret that I'm this person either. And that was never expected of me either. So they never said like, we're going to sign an NDA here. You cannot. There's this other guy. If you're going to get interviewed, it's going to be one of those like ones where
you'll always be wearing this hat. You'll always have this.
Exactly.
You're going to let me
go get Nick.
Yes.
So no, it was always okay that I sort of present myself as both of these people, but I mean the funny thing is with so many writers, you recognize that their first book is kind of the one that they're known for. It's rare, and for some people it's like you want to climb that mountain peak again or get to get known by something other than your first book. But when you look at it, like there's just so many writers who their first book is sort of the one that they're most known for. And that's, it's, I think as a writer, you're sort of like, it'd be like as an athlete, most of them wouldn't be known for their rookie season. That's where they're sort of still sort of learning things, and they're learning the grind. And it's by their fifth or sixth or seventh season, maybe, that they become an all-star. That was not the expectation, or that was not the thought when you write that first book, that it's going to sort of define your career. But you're happy to have
especially
it,
if you think you've gotten so much better. You know what I mean? If you're like, I've developed so much more.
But it's also like you have your tricks, and once, it's like, here, I'm juggling these balls. And they're like, oh, great, I really like that. And they're like, come back, and like, I'm juggling these balls. Like, well, they're kind of the same balls.
They're kind of doing the same balls.
Yeah, but they're a bit higher this time. Yeah, I get it.
I put in a chainsaw.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my hair's a different color. Yeah, I get it, but it's not really distracting from the fact it's the same balls. Anyways, we should be so happy to have these kind of problems, because if you're even entertaining those problems, it means you've probably been around for a while anyways. So that's, in most cases, fairly fortunate.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I was going to mention The Troop. Two things about it. One is that it very much falls into one of my favorite genres, which is like the doom protagonist.
Yeah.
The thing that starts with some people saying, let's go check this thing out, and that no one is getting out of it alive.
That's
like Alien, or the obvious one would be The Ruins.
Yes, exactly.
And so I was going to say the connection there was you could take the path of Scott Smith, right, 2 knockout books and then just disappear.
Well, yeah, and he's moved to TV.
Screen.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, and he wrote both The Ruins and A Simple Plan, the sort of the movie version. So he probably doesn't need to. You're right. Just write 2 knockout books, or yeah. And why would you need to go back necessarily? I wouldn't be surprised to see Scott. He wrote a short story. It was like a novella for this anthology that I was a part of called Dark Cities. Yeah. So he every so often does, sort of pop up and write something. But you're right. I mean, I love that kind of the doom protagonist. And I like kind of the notion of people persisting ideally to maintain some sense of humanity and grace, even when they recognize, this is not going to go well. That entombed itself 7 or 8 pages ago. And yet we're not going to try to not descend into savagery, and try to stay at least some level of nobility and human grace, despite the fact that we're going down in the ship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. The Thing is another good one like that.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's going to seem really out of left field, but I just saw an article about some doomed mission for the British Royal Navy to the North Pole, and they ended up getting stuck in ice and ended up resorting to cannibalism. They all died
Yeah,
and
the
all that stuff.
terror.
It was in
Yeah.
Canada, and but they just did like sort of like DNA testing, so they were able to like see who the people were, the bones that they have, and then they can also tell based on the sort of markings on the bones, like who were the eaters and who was eaten
Who were the
by the
who
truth.
resorted earliest.
Yes, basically,
Yeah.
kind of where it broke down. And what they said was actually it was like one of the guys was an officer who was eaten. And they were like, it kind of showed that like in that zone, all of a sudden everything broke down, which they were saying is a big deal because for the hierarchy of command in that unit, that was everything. Chain of command was everything.
Yeah,
the idea that you would be like, guess what, dude? All bets are off now, you know.
It's the Lord.
We've been here for 10 minutes. You're looking pretty good.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. But there's a McDonald's right there.
Yeah, exactly.
But that idea of like, you know, yes, you would try to hold on to some sort of humanity and society and not be just animals.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. I don't know if you guys
doesn't
ever
always
did
go
see
that way.
the Terror based on the Dan Simmons book.
I did not. No.
But okay, well, I don't want to give you.
I read the book.
Did you? Okay, I've not read the book. Yeah, anyway, I won't say it because there's a scene right at the very end of that speaks to the notion of like the collapse of things, I think is what is scary of like there's these internal, I mean, that might be even about the election, what scares things. Because it's like there's this internal sense of order and hierarchy. And when those things start to dissolve and you feel like there's this perforation of the
sun is going away.
Right, yeah, it's going down. It's going traveling the wrong way through the sky or whatever. It's like this is everything's wrong about this. So I think there's something very human in order, even as we might buck against it. But when it dissolves, it's much scarier.
I absolutely agree, and I think you do a good job of bringing that concept into your books. Like I said, they're grounded. The ones that get too fantastic or, you know, like Lovecraft, where there's really not anything to grasp onto in reality, it kind of loses me. It's
for each person's taste, right? You know, I like Lovecraft, but I know exactly what you're saying. It's one of the things about horror, and this would be any genre, is that people have their affinities and they have their, it's funny because coming from the quote unquote literary sphere, I mean, there's a lot of elitism there. You know, I can't think of how many like dinner parties I've been to or like cocktail things where you're like, oh, what do you write? Oh, you know what I mean? And like undisguised, really, sort of like, you know, when you're looking at him like, you're a small press poet. What are you talking about? Like, what the hell do you get off? You know what I mean?
That's probably the snootiest kind of person.
Even gives you more so than that. You know what I mean? It's not like you're writing like literary, you know, I don't know.
No, exactly. And especially, I think my horror too is more like, you know, sort of pulpy. And I just, you know, we just finished talking. I've been to university. I've got a PhD. Like, it's not that I couldn't write elevated horror, whatever that is. If there's anyone who is preconditioned to do it, I suppose I would have the sort of word salad behind my name that you'd say, oh, well, that guy should be able to do it. It's like, well, yeah, but I don't really, that's not what I guess that's not where my aesthetic finds itself. So to find that there is a bit of an elitist strain in horror, it was kind of shocking to me. I'm like, oh, I thought I left this behind over here. And then you come over and you open this new door and you step into this new party. It's like, oh no.
It's the same party.
There's the same party. They're the same people.
There were other horror writers that were looking down their nose at you?
Well, I wouldn't say it's specifically like no one's done that exact thing, but yeah, I think there's this notion of elevated horror, and some of the books that they're talking about, like I love those books. You know, I get it. I get the value of those books. I get how great that they are, and I really like the writers as practitioners, and I think their success is fully earned. But that there's,
I also like fun.
Yeah, I mean, like I like anything. I like whatever. Like I think my palate is such that, you know, I would embrace almost anything that horror throws at me, or literature for that matter. It's just you run up against these people sometimes. This is kind of a long-winded story, but like I remember when I was doing my MA, I showed up there and I just barely got into the program. Like I just scraped in by the skin of my teeth. And there was a guy, and I don't mean to besmirch him.
He's a jerk.
What's his name?
Where does he live?
Is he famous now?
Well, he wore a beret. He wore a beret in class. Wow. And like cocked right here and the little thing coming up on top. And he would say stuff that I'm like, the elan of this man, he's wearing a beret. He must be just furiously intelligent.
Just a real asshole.
He would, answer somebody's question. And you realize, you dissect it, and I'm like, he spoke for a minute and didn't say anything of consequence at all. And yet he thinks he did. And I think it was like the emperor's new clothes. And I realized, you know what? There's a lot of people in this program who aren't wearing a beret, but may as well be wearing a beret.
Right. Or dramatically throw a scarf as they leave a room.
Yeah. And it's a lot of like presentation versus actual like on the ground intellect or dedication or whatever. And it's like a lot of people, I think, who wanted to be writers and wanted to be seen as smart, but didn't necessarily have the intensity or desire to put into the work to be that thing that they wanted to other people to see them as.
Well, I think that's it. Putting in the work is like the key component there.
Yeah. And it's unlovely, and it's often boring and quotidian, and there's nothing particularly glamorous about it, at least if my life is any indication of that. But I think that does prevail in horror too. There's a lot of people who are like almost scared of being seen as unintellectual. And the way that they cope with that is to shit on books whose aesthetic they feel is beneath the genre. And it's like, I don't know, the genre's already maligned. Why would you, from within the genre, seek to malign it further?
I mean, we're talking about horror here. There's a very low base for you to go,
You would think, right?
I don't know what's beneath that.
Right. I think that probably comes from a sense of like justified sense of wanting to protect the genre, I think, in some way. But then you risk becoming a gatekeeper, and you risk becoming an elitist, and you risk sort of alienating readers or otherwise just conversational partners who are like, you know what, fair enough. That's your aesthetic. That's the way you want to go about it. Well, I'll go over here and do my own thing. As I said, I will read anything.
I'm going to this other party over in this other room. It's going to be great.
The same party again. These are all an interconnected party. Yeah.
We're going to talk about torturing our characters, stress testing them.
Okay, so I have a question. I'm going to lighten it with that, but the torturing of characters. So as you're writing in that and you're getting, does that like a scene where somebody's really getting unraveled? And I mean, both physically and mentally, probably, but mostly physically. As you're going down that hill, does that like a snowball, you just start going and it goes? Or are you like, I got to revisit that and add some more? Like, how do those things work for you?
Say a little bit of A, a little bit of B. Sometimes you wonder if you've written past the point of even being published. I think sometimes in those scenes, I remember 100% one of my first short stories, it was like about this couple who fought dogs, and I had a dog fighting scene, and I was like, oh boy, this is 7 pages. That's too long for a dog fight scene. It must be. It has to be too long.
When you say that, I'm assuming you mean that the dogs are fighting each other. But I like to picture a world where it's a couple, and what they do is they get in the ring and they fight dogs.
I should have.
I'll read 7 pages of that.
I'm saying you could give me 8.5.
I'll give you credit, Ken, if I steal that at some point.
Good.
But no, it was 2 dogs fighting one another in that incident, and I thought, I've gone. But it got published, and that sort of lets you realize that okay, whatever your assumed threshold of your reader, it's probably best not to even think of what that might be, and because that would sort of limit you, and it would paralysis by analysis, I think is the term. But sometimes my wife will hear me cackling like a satyr upstairs, and she's like, oh, and I'm sure. I mean, I can't see through walls, but I'm sure she just looks up and just like, oh dear God, he's doing something reprehensible up there to some person in his fictional worlds, and I can't. I might have to visit a divorce attorney before too long.
She's like questioning her life decisions at that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Does she read your stuff?
Yeah, she will. She'll edit it for me too.
Wow.
Copy edit it. So yeah, I usually get her at it sort of at the late stages of it because we met at an English program. We met at that master's. She wasn't wearing a beret.
I was going to say, did you have a scarf or a beret?
No, she was not. Yeah, so she's great and all sorts of levels, but she's really good at just like the crunchy sort of as another set of eyes for an edit. But yeah, in terms of those scenes, I sometimes do like just propulsively go downhill, and you kind of know when you're getting to those scenes that you're like, oh, I'm kind of looking forward to this, and I've written myself into a place where I can go out. But one thing I used to do, and I don't do it anymore, but I still in my head it's there. Like I used to have a sticky note and I put it on the side of my desk with all the 5 senses. And sometimes you'll track back through a scene like that. And I've always thought a way to sort of pull readers in better is through the senses. And even with film, it's obviously very visual. Books are usually, when you read them, if it's a cinematically styled book, it's often quite visual still.
Yeah.
But, if you can bring in other sensory apparatuses, like the way something smells or hear, a sound that someone might hear, or even a touch, tactile sort of sensation, I find those things all kind of help. So generally it's first flush. But when I go through on an edit, it's usually to try and reinforce certain sensory details that I might have missed the first time through.
Yeah, those are all very apparent in The Queen.
Right. Yeah.
No, it's great though, because it really does. It hits a note or hits a nerve. It's funny. I was talking to a friend when I saw Hostel.
Oh, yeah.
So my wife and I randomly were driving by the movie theater, and we're like, let's go to the movies. Let's see what's up. And, so she's like, I don't know, let's pop in. What is this? And so that was coming on. And I was like, I was a big Tarantino fan. I'm like, oh my God, it's a Tarantino horror movie. It's going to be cool. It's going to be great. It's going to be groovy.
It was Eli Roth, wasn't it?
I think it was Eli Roth, but it was produced by Quentin Tarantino.
Produced by Tarantino. Sorry. So his name was attached to it anyway. But and oh my God, they start getting into it, and like they're just going and going, and it's the gore and all that stuff. And I realized at this point, I realized as he got up, I was like, I think I'm just too old for it.
Yeah.
Like 16-year-old me would have been all about this.
Yeah, exactly.
But like 35-year-old me was like, I walked out of there and was like, I got to go like watch The Lion King. I got to like restore whatever part of my soul has been like fractured by that. Yeah. And I will say there are parts of like of your book in a very good way, both books really, where I walked away. I was like, ooh, man, I need a cleanser. You have hit a nerve. You got wrapped around or whatever.
I don't know what's wrong with me, but I still love that stuff. As long as there's context, if it deserves it and if it leads to that, then it's fun. If like watch something like The Fly that's just gooey and disgusting. Or recently, have you seen The Substance?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, I was like giggling through that. I was like, oh, this is delightfully gross.
That's my general feeling as well, right? Like I think The Substance, you're supposed to do that. Not through all of it, but like it's not meant to be a bleak kind of hang as a movie. It's sort of like
I think that's what caught me by surprise.
Yeah, exactly. But I know exactly. And The Fly the same way. It's like, it's trying to say something, and it's ultimately a sad story, but I don't know, Cronenberg just has such a delightful way with that Gru that, that I don't, for me anyways, again, my aesthetic too, it's just sort of like, no, I dig that as well. And I dig when someone goes there, but at the same point, like I totally get, Ken, your sense, or probably your wife's sense when you just went to Hostel, like a little both of us, or like the Terrifier film series, which has become super popular, but it's like, then again, it's like, they're not trying to lie to anybody about what they're doing. They're not trying to get gulls. In fact, people are going there. I think they'd probably be let down if it wasn't as hostile to viewers as it is, right? They would think that they've gone toothless or something, which again is not really my thought. I'm actually going over my next book right now, and I'm surprised by that. I'm like well than halfway through it, and it's like, man, there's nothing gory's happened so far. What's going on? It's not.
Just you wait.
I know. Having written it, I know it gets gory towards the end, but I'm sort of surprised by my own like restraint.
So I guess that leads back to writing under your own name. So you've got all your horror stuff under Nick Cutter, but under Craig Davidson. Actually, when I was doing some research before we initially spoke, I didn't know you were two people. Well, I didn't know you claimed to be two people.
Yes, it's actually 7 people.
I had read Saturday Night Ghost Club a while ago, not knowing you were Nick Cutter.
Right.
So where do you land on that? Like, do you still like to write for more general audiences or things that aren't horror, or be able to use that platform for just something different?
Yeah, I feel like it's a weird feeling. There's a little bit of I don't know if either of you have watched or read The Dark Half back in the day. Timothy Hutton would have been the movie, it's the Stephen King book, or it would have been a Richard Bachman book, I think. But
thank you.
I have had that same experience, although I have been supplanted by my pen name. If these lights are on behind me, it's because Nick Cutter is keeping them on. Because Craig Davidson is keeping them on. But that said, like I have a book that I'm working on under contract. But weirdly, it actually has now I had to tell my editor, the other side of my writing persona has infected this book somewhat. So, but even with the Saturday Ghost Club, that's very much like influenced by Stephen King and Robert R. McCammon and sort of John Belair's and all sorts of writers who I read while I was growing up. So
Yeah.
even there, it kind of like the first early books under my name were like Tom Jones would have been the inspiration, and such short story writers I liked, and they were taken up with boxing and masculinity and stuff like that, which I feel like now at my age, I just it doesn't enthuse me anymore.
Right.
But would I like to write? I mean, I do have 2 more Cutter books under contract that I'll write, and that I'm pleased and happy to write. I have 1 more book under my own name, and honestly, guys, I'm 49 as I speak to you now, and I'll be done these books by the time I'm 50, at least, in their sort of rough draft. And I might just take a very siesta, very, very long break. You know what I mean? I think my wife looks at me and she's like, you need a break, man. You need to do something else with your life for a little bit. And, I'm not sure what you both, but, once you get to my age, it's like, yeah, if you'd like to do something else, but what?
Yeah.
You've worked so hard to be this thing that you are, and it becomes like that pair of golden handcuffs almost. And I think other people would say, well, why would you want to do anything different? Like, aren't you living sort of like the dream that you thought you wanted to be in high school, which is true. And I'm grateful to be able to do that. But
you want to see what else there is?
Well, I'd love to. And there's only so much, there's only so much time to do it in.
I was actually going to ask you about like that, because you've had like a lot of different jobs, like obviously, the bus driver gig, in the middle.
Yeah.
Did you know what you were getting into there?
With bus driving?
Was it like, this is going to be something that could be, good, not material. I hate
good fodder.
Yeah. I hate to.
No. That's unfortunately one of the parts I've recognized about being a writer is that you, that switch never turns off. And sometimes it can be really kind of intrusive. It's like, are you doing this thing for the pure purpose of doing it? Or are you doing it because you think that you're going to get a story out of it? And there was definitely a point in my life where, there was a flyer showed up my mailbox looking for bus drivers. I needed a job.
You were writing at the time?
I was writing. Yeah, I was. But I was sort of not making a living at it. So I certainly needed something to keep a roof over my head. And so it sort of felt like it could fulfill both things. So once I recognized I'm driving those kids for a couple months, and I realized like I'm just having a great time here. And I really do enjoy spending time with them and talking to them, and I've spoken to their parents. But then you have to start asking their parents, really, like, I'm not sure I'm going to write anything about this ever, but if I do, would that be okay? And, you two being parents yourselves, like,
yeah, you gotta not feel exploited.
Yeah, exactly. And they're, I'm in my early 30s at that point, and I'm desperate to be a writer, and you're, there's a lot of moral kind of, and up until then, I'd just been a fiction writer. Like I'd written magazine pieces and stuff, and some of them had sort of, focused on myself really though, but you can exploit yourself as much as you want. But when it comes to other people, obviously it's a different thing.
I thought it was nice. I mean, it's really well done. There's a lot of heart in it, and respect.
I appreciate it, and I really enjoyed the experience. I really did, and I'm working with one of those boys. He's trying to be a novelist, and we're working back and forth with it. He's not a boy anymore, I should say, adult.
Sure.
But and so I keep in touch with him specifically.
Can you imagine being the parent now, as a parent, and they're like, hey, by the way, your kid's bus driver wants to talk to you about writing a book about writing a story about your kid. Yeah, like that guy? That guy, I'd be like, okay, drive the bus, dude.
Guy. Yeah, no, I was, I could only imagine what they must have been thinking, right? So, but I arranged interviews with them and chatted with them.
I was gonna say, they're gonna be thrilled with
that. Yeah,
so it's cool. It was so interesting to me to see sort of that jog there, and then obviously the fighter, sort of aspect of things.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course. And how that all just plummeted down the drain hole. So, but I mean, that's again, not an uncommon experience. It's amazing this many years on how often I see a person who's written 1 or 2 books and then they just disappear off the face of the earth. So it seems I'm just like, I love those books. Where did you go? And so every so often you'll run into one of them. Some of them, it's a different story for everyone. Some of them, like, I just didn't like the pressure of it. I didn't like the criticism that was involved in it. Some are just like, I just want to write a book. That was sort of a bucket list thing, and I did it, and I had no urge to ever do it again. But I think some of them are just
like
like,
Harper Lee, right?
yeah, some of them just, they feel the hurt of it, I think. And I noticed that even in my university classes, there are some people who just, it hurt really bad. And criticism always does hurt, but I think it's one thing you just have to tolerate as a writer or a creative person, because not everyone is going to like what you do. Some people are just
Sure.
naturally going to not like it, and you can't do anything to make them like it. And some people just find that too hurtful, I think, to really tolerate, despite their talents.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, that's all in the personality. I wanted to ride the segue a second ago. There was a couple of things that led into your other writing, talking about exploiting yourself and magazine articles.
Yeah,
I was surprised to come across some of those when I was reading through your website.
sure.
The one
Are you
specifically.
flexing right now? Are you flexing right now to show
Oh
us
yeah, exactly.
your biceps? You're like, yes, I do remember writing for a magazine.
Yes. So it was. What was it called? Like, I want to say Maximum Fitness.
Maximum Fitness.
What was Maximum?
I did used to write for Maximum Fitness. I was actually an editor there. I think you're talking about are you talking about the steroids article?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was Esquire. Weirdly enough.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I did it all while I was in Iowa. All those steroids, but I ended up coming home back to Calgary, and I wrote a piece about it and I sent it off to.
So for those who don't know it, so you did 16 weeks, or what was the?
I guess, was it 16 weeks? Yeah, I think my mind has sort of erased a lot of that. But yes, I ordered, first of all, and I probably wrote about this, and you guys have read the article more recently potentially than I have, or skimmed it at least. Getting them was very tough, as you might be,
You would
expect,
hope, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm not the sort of guy to like just hang around bulky guys at the gym and say, "Hey, you look like a strapping fellow. Do you happen to have roids I could loan off you?"
Right.
But you end up, you go to the back of like Men's Fitness and you get fake roids, first of all, like pills or whatever. And I took those. I'm like, these feel like speed or something. I feel like really jazzed up, but I don't feel like it's helping me. And then I had to buy a membership to a black website, whatever you'd call it. You know what I mean? Like
a dark web thing.
Right. It was like a $20. So you got onto that website, and that's where the actual steroid sellers were. And so I made a deal with somebody, and they showed up from somewhere overseas. And, it just shows like I remember being up in my like attic apartment in Iowa City with like this weird needle, gonna jab it in my.
Just like, this is steroids. This is what it is.
Micro world.
It says it on the box. It says it's steroids on the box.
Yeah. I don't even know the language. I think it's steroids. I'm assuming. Right. And I'm just thinking I could put it into my vein right now and like end up dying of a embolism up here in my stupid room in Iowa. So just, I was not in a particularly thoughtful place in my life, but they worked. Blah, blah, blah. Story told, they worked. And they did all the things that they said they would do. They really did. So
you were already lifting, and like you were already obviously very into fitness and all that stuff at the time.
I was, just for something to do, really. And they bloated me. I remember going back to my buddy's bachelor party, and I came back, and I was like, it was the summer, and I was wearing a shirt, and I was sweating all through it. I was all sweaty and gross, and I was fluid filled, and they're just like, "What's the matter with him?" I'm like, I can go pick up that mailbox over there. You just watch me, that newspaper box.
Yeah. Right. But the funniest and like most exposing part was, talking very openly about all the side effects too.
Yeah.
And understanding that like, that's what people go through.
Oh, and I had a lot of, I don't know if I said this, I don't think I said in the article, but I got a lot of feedback from roid users who were very upset that they thought I had embellished. And they were like,
"Oh my God, you're giving us a bad name.
Your testicles shrunk." Remember one guy was like, they don't shrink that much, man. Like maybe a quarter of the normal size. And what, did you have jeweler's calipers out and measured them? One size to the other. Did you weigh very upset about that. So,
that's wild.
Yeah, it was wild. The whole experience was wild. But as I always say, and every so often I'll get someone who will want to have me on a podcast or something to talk about. I mean, I'm speaking to you now, but like in a more sort of muscle and fitness type of way. And I'm like,
interesting.
I did it one time for the purposes of a book, which didn't help the book at all.
Was there, for shits and giggles, was there any, like when you were stopping, were you like, thank God and relieved probably at that point? It seems like sort of in the tenor of the article, at least, makes it feel like you're like noticing changes and not comfortable with them.
I wasn't comfortable with it, but I wasn't comfortable with the other side either when it was like a balloon with all the air coming out of it, it felt like we were just sort of like, oh no, I can see the addictive quality of steroids for sure, and the effectiveness of them as well. But no, I there's certainly no point in which I ever decided. I don't like putting needles in myself on that level.
Most don't.
Most people don't, right? Exactly. So yeah, the whole thing was a boondoggle for the most part, but it was worth writing an article about. I'm glad at least I got that out.
Had you already been contracted by Esquire to write it?
So no.
You knew this was an avenue for it, or you were like, this is going to be a great story? And
I just wrote it and I sent it out blind, and I came back home one day from the library, and I was an editor from Esquire who had left a message.
Was he the one saying his balls hadn't shrunk that much?
Oh, yeah, right. First of all, we need to clear that up, because not all of them shrunk near that much. But no, he said that the slush pile, like the last thing that they picked from the slush pile was like 10 years ago, and it was an Elizabeth Gilbert piece who did Eat, Pray, Love. So that's pretty good company. And no one else called back, and Esquire was the only one who ever did, and we worked on it, and it was a cool experience. It never led to anything. I hoped I would be like a staff writer for Esquire, but they said, no, you're just a piece. We don't need anything else from you.
Just went on this crazy journey by yourself.
Yeah, that's right. That's
right.
We'll call you. Don't call us.
Right. We'll give you that.
All right. So before we get into the next part, like what's on the horizon now? You're talking about possibly taking a break. You've got a couple more books in the works.
3? So you actually do have a Craig Davidson thing coming?
A Craig Davidson book, which I just sent off, and I'm pretty happy with it. So that'll come out, I'm not sure when, maybe next year. And then I have a book called The Dorians, which, again, I was upstairs working on, which is about a bunch of elderly people who go to an island, which I've done that before, but not elderly people, but island settings.
Is there a Boy Scout troop there?
And like a Fountain of Youth sort of idea. Involving jellyfish. Okay. I don't know if you guys have heard, jellyfish are one of the only creatures on Earth, or the only creature
that live forever.
That can live forever, biological immunity. So it's an interesting idea. And then I've got a follow-up to that about some juvenile offenders at a detention facility in the remote Canadian wilderness. Okay. So yeah, that'll be the last one that I'm contracted for anyways.
All right. So say you wrap all those books up, you hit 50.
Yeah.
What's the dream?
Oh man, kayak fishing.
Ooh, okay. All right.
Sincerely, my son loves fishing, and it's gotten me back into it again. Like, I can't make a living at that, obviously. I don't want to be a fishing guide. I feel like that's way too much pressure for me to take money from people to actually catch fish for them.
Right.
But
you could tell stories.
I could.
You are not going to catch any fish, but you will be entertained.
Yeah. I think I just take a couple years off, and fortunately, we are. My wife and I have the financial liberty that I could do that really. And
yeah, that's
great.
I
go back and write another book in my 50s at some point. Sort of go on a more sedate schedule of like a book every couple years, or maybe I take a couple years off and all sorts of ideas start flowing back into my head, and I'm like, oh, I'll rattle off a bunch really quick potentially. Because I think that's one thing about being a writer. You can just always be it more or less, whether there's going to be an audience out there that's receptive. What you're shilling, who knows?
Mm-hmm. Hopefully it builds, right? So you're, at this point now, you've got a name.
Yeah. And if I go dormant for a while, I don't think anyone's going to be clamoring necessarily, but they might be like, oh, well, you got something new a couple years later. Yeah, we'll hope anyways. So we'll see. There's no hard and fast thing. I just don't have a second thing that I immediately I can just jettison this for this.
Open yourself up to the Hollywood abuse then.
Maybe so.
Kind of be I'm available to be abused on the set and I got time,
As long as they got the money, I got the time to take an advantage.
Can handle the criticism.
Well, even the money part of it, you're like, I can take a little step back on that, maybe a little, but before I think I know where Aaron's going. I did want to ask, and this is going to seem really random too, but it came up in The Deep and it came up in The Queen, but the idea of a tickle trunk. The tickle trunk is a toy box, yes. I'm assuming. Did you have one as a kid?
We did have one.
Does poor Nick have a tickle trunk? Do you have it?
No, I don't think you guys would go too, having kids around the same age.
No?
like a chest of drawers. Mine was like
I knew.
a pirate's chest sort of a thing that you would dig up
No.
out of the sand,
Mhm.
buried under an X. Yeah, so no, I don't know if they're as popular anymore.
Like the toy chest thing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was like, so because you describe it, you go through all that in the deep. And when it's first introduced, I was like, oh, that is not, I don't want any part of
Right.
tickle trunk. I don't want anything. Like the way,
The
and he
name
goes,
alone is just grody.
and you go right to the clowns too. I'm like, oh, this is really just hitting all the marks here. But so you have that, and then randomly in the Queen, there's like just a total throwaway of somebody. It's like, oh yeah, this tickle trunk. I was like, what? No, get out of here with your tickle trunk. Nobody needs your tickle trunk.
It's funny. Some people mention things like that. They'll link things in different
So
books,
weird.
and I'm not aware of it. But there's obviously something crass ticking away in some chamber of my brain that brings them back.
I'm assuming. So, like I said, I've read those two. I'm assuming there's a tickle trunk in every.
I
just can't wait to see where it
I'll
pops
have to
up.
put one in
next.
this up here too. I'll have to give one of the
Yes, they're gonna discover
randomly
it on
in
the
the
island.
forest.
Dig up under the
What's that
island.
tickle trunk doing here?
There's insects with a million skillion legs.
That's true too.
Gross.
Yeah, that's another term I like to use.
Yeah, there was some good ones in this.
I think it's cool though, because honestly, in a weird way, it was like a cool throw.
Ah, cool.
Like,
I'm glad.
that's
I
cool.
forgot about it. I probably I probably should put one in this new book. Give me an idea.
Very good. But Ken's tickle trunk open for business.
It's going on Instagram.
That sounds like a very different area, actually. Now that you say that, you put somebody's name in front of it. Now it feels really weird. Anyway.
All right. Enough of Ken's tickle trunk.
Yes. Sorry.
So the point of this podcast is we kind of want to get to know the people behind the creative works, you know, and see how people tick and like what has driven them to whatever it is they've created or like to create, you know. And so that goes back to their home. It sounds like you bounced around a bit, which is a common theme among our guests.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to call a place home, where would that be at this point in time?
Obviously, it has to be St. Catharines, Ontario, which is the setting of the Queen and is the setting of, not quite Saturday Night Ghost Club, but close enough. Niagara Falls. It's called the Golden Horseshoe here in Ontario. It's several small towns or mid-sized towns between Toronto and Niagara Falls, Ontario. That's sort of an hour and a half sort of encapsulation of this place. And yeah, as you said, Aaron, I was born in Toronto, but we moved to Ottawa and then Calgary and then back to Ottawa. And so my dad was a banker, so we just moved around quite a bit as kids, my brother and I. But we ended up settling in St. Catharines for grade 10 to grade 13. The Dunderhead year. And and then after that, I went away to university in Peterborough, so 3 hours away from St. Catharines. But yet it just seems to have been the place that most of my work is set, and I feel the most comfortable. I think writing a book for a lot of people, especially staring at those first couple empty pages, it's just a real, there's an emptiness to it, right? So you want to try and orient and fixate yourself on things that you feel confident with and you feel comfortable around. And so for me, setting has always been that. I wouldn't have said that. I mean, we've lived here in Toronto longer than I've ever lived in anywhere else. And probably eventually I will set a book here. But up until now, it's always been back in St. Catharines. And it just feels like I understand those people. I understand their rhythms. But every so often I'll have someone come up and they've read a book of mine and they're like, why do you hate us so much?
It's great. I love that
I don't
answer.
mean it that way.
So true.
It's your Dairy Maine.
Yeah, well,
Right.
yeah, I wish, right? I wish I'd do anything for even one book as good as Stephen King has done. But it's the same idea, the same sort of, I think, familiarity and the same sort of sense of knowing the people and knowing the rhythms.
That's perfect. So the second part of this is when Ken and I flee the country.
Which is imminent.
That's in the near future.
T minus.
We were coming and staying with you.
Sure.
What's the Craig Davidson tour of that area for a day? What are you taking us to do?
Good question. Hilariously, some of the best food is honestly over the border in your guys' side again. Niagara Falls, New York has some of and Buffalo. We used to always go over there. The pizza's awesome there, and the chicken wings are maybe unsurprisingly great there. But we Canadians have stolen your guys' recipes by now, so you can get really quality food on our side. So I know, for the scary stuff, I take you to the Screaming Tunnels, which if you've read the Saturday Night Ghost Club is an actual sort of historical, scary landmark. And after that, go up and down Clifton Hill in Niagara Falls.
I did not read the Screaming Tunnels. What makes them?
Well, the legend is that, this is so bleak, but a girl died in them in the middle of this long tunnel. And if you light a match at the stroke of midnight in that tunnel, the girl will appear and scream at you.
Oh. Is there any relevance to the match or midnight?
No, I don't know how that legend started or where it came from, but I remember I went with my son, not at midnight, not at any time like that, but we just like walked the tunnel and he was freaked out. And so was I. And I hadn't even told him about the legend. I just said, let's just walk through this tunnel. And it was like bright daylight. So I was not trying to scar him emotionally or anything like that, but he just felt like a weird vibe. And I'm like, yeah, me too, dude. I don't like this. So, I take you there and then I take you to Niagara Falls. And if you guys are beer drinkers, maybe we'd, visit a brewery. They have the breweries there now. And then maybe or a winery, because it's actually more, the escarpment there is really popular. And
I think you hit on both of our things. I'm more of a beer drinker. Ken is more of a wine drinker.
Oh, well, beautiful. Yep. We can cover both tastes there. So yeah, I think I'd do something like that.
Okay.
Very cool.
So your pizza and wings?
Pizza, wings, wine, beer.
All right.
Screaming Tunnels.
And Screaming Tunnels.
It sounds like a good time to me. Yeah. What kind of pizza are you going for?
We have up here, it's the cup and char pepperoni is now very popular, which are these little tiny pepperonis that curl up. And that was like an American thing that we have adopted over here. But there's a place over there called Sammy's, which I have taken many Canadians and many Americans even it was in Iowa. It's funny. We're up here in Canada, we're very prim and proper, really. Like there's bars that I was in Iowa and bars that I've been in Niagara Falls. I'm like, this is like a school portable. I don't think there's any fire code regulations here that they're really enforcing in any way, shape, or form. And yet the pizza is great. The ambiance is great. They're just more fun, really, than sort of Canadian bars. So, yeah, we dig them. I wish Canada sort of was a bit more loosey-goosey that way. Divey. Yeah, I really do. So
yep,
these are my favorites.
Aaron and I was talking about it. Love a good dive.
No, I love a good dive. Yeah, we don't have to. They're too sanitized up here. It's tough to find a good dive, and the dives here are really divey.
Like not fun divey, just locals only divey.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. What kind of beer are you drinking?
What do I have? Anything basically. I went through the IPA phase, through the sour phase. The sours I never quite return to, but I love an IPA, love a good stout, love a microbrew, like a Pabst, even anything. Yeah. How about you guys?
Same. I went through this similar phases. I never got into the sours very much at all. It's like not beer for me.
Yeah.
But like I've realized just that as I've gotten older, the hangover is brutal, and so it's like I can drink Miller Lights till the sun comes up and be fine, and I can drink wine and be fine. But man, I have like 2 or 3 IPAs. And the next day I'm just like struggling.
Yeah, so, I used to drink everything, and now I like less of everything. Pretty much just IPAs, maybe some stouts.
He's narrowed his focus.
It narrowed your focus.
Very much so.
He's like, I've seen what's out there.
Same thing.
Hangovers are wicked. With the microbrews especially, I feel like, and they're great, but man, like you're paying for it the next day, and we're just at that age where it's just
brutal. Yeah. And especially if you have kids, you got to get up, you got to be functioning.
I know.
You don't get to
trying to get through the day with a hangover with a kid who wants to go to the park or something.
I look back on my like college days and I'm like, God, if you could just flip flop everything,
I know.
If I could just have that lifestyle, but like, because of course when I had the time and the means, I didn't have the money, so it was like, right. Or the taste per se.
No.
We were drinking like ice beer and Milwaukee's Best and that stuff, and just going at it, and that was what mattered.
But at the same time, you could also be like, I'm just going to walk outside, and some fresh air will cure this hangover.
Exactly. Yeah. I could drink a St. Ides and just walk outside and feel okay.
Right. It's awesome. The where that has come up is like going to a wedding and you see the younger kids drinking, and the day after the wedding and you go to like breakfast the next day and like everybody fine. You can see there's like a line of demarcation where it's like everybody over this age is like, oh my God, I just can't. And then it's like all the young kids are like, hey, what's going on?
Yeah, let's crack it. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I know. It's so it's wasted on the young. It's just how it is.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. All right. Well, we don't need to keep you all afternoon. We'll let you get back to your 3 books you're working on right now?
Yeah, flip-flopping them around. Really just 2 right now, but the third one's in the hopper. So no, it was lovely to talk, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, this is great.
This was a treat.
And by the way, might reframe it that you are a 13th grade success story. It really came together for you.
Thank you. I think they should put my photo up at the school and just like
it came back. We had one more grade. We produced
the extra year helped this guy. We don't know where he would have been without 13.
Just a great success.